Hi, everybody. If you're watching this, I hope it means that you enjoyed listening to Chapter 1 of my novel, Living Nightmare. Today I'll be reading Chapter 2. In Chapter 1, Tobin woke from a nightmare to a roommate who then asked for a room change. And a nurse asked Tobin to write in her dream journal, which her doctor wanted as part of her treatment plan. She was about to walk out of her room. Chapter 2. Routine. They shove it down our throats, hoping that daily repetition will douse the crazy infestation feeding on our brains. If mindless slugs are what they want, congratulations. Job done. We wake and dress at their demand. Pop pills based on a schedule determined by those who claim to know what we need. Can they? Do they? I hope so. For now I will bob when told, follow the others, and hope the man with the curled cane knows where he's going. Tobin. The stairs were the worst. The moment she left her bedroom, they were on her like an unwanted touch. No one came near Tobin, but their gazes followed her as she walked down the off-white hallway with its 6 bedrooms, doors open on either side. The open doors were a rule of Manuel's. Patients could stay in their bedrooms but weren't allowed to close their doors. Tobin didn't have to look in the rooms to know there were copies of hers, the furthest away at the end of the hallway. She passed a guard in a navy uniform. He glared at her as he made a sweep to ensure the wandering patients were behaving. Tobin stared back. The guard, a baby-faced man in his late 20s, looked away first. Tobin grinned and kept walking, her slipper-cased feet muffling the sounds of her footfalls. Smudges from dirty hands marked up the walls between bedrooms. The cleaning staff tried to get rid of them weekly, only to find new ones in their place. Tobin looked at the silver baseboard and the patches of chipped paint above it. Someone had managed to leave a dent in one section of the baseboard when they kicked it during a fit. She rolled her eyes. Violence was a useless response to not getting one's way. 2 patients loitered by a bedroom door until they saw her, then scurried into the room. She saw the women pop their heads out the door when she passed. She didn't glance back, but her muscles tensed. Their eyes were hot on her back. I heard she hit Lacey, someone said. No, she tried to strangle Lacey when the poor girl went to wake her, another cut in. Tobin kept walking. The whispers were one thing. She had learned to tune them out a week after being admitted at 13. At 19, the hushed words were flicked away like annoying lint. Words only had power if she let them. Growing up, she heard her parents recite that phrase often enough, and it becomes second nature to mute the cruel gossip. Too bad she couldn't do the same with the staring. The patients on the 4th floor ward saw her as a shaking can of Coke. They watched, waiting for the tab to be popped, waiting for Tobin to lose it. They could wait forever. Tobin tugged her pants up. The pants were the same color as her shirt, and they both swallowed her thin figure. One size fits all. Not. The pants were too long. Tobin wasn't tall, maybe 5'5", and she had learned to do the waistband 4 times after growing tired of tripping on the bottoms. The patients' uniforms were gender neutral. Male patients wore the same clothes as females. Whoever was in charge of buying uniforms probably bought bulk in the male cut, and it made some of them look ridiculous. She shook her head. 3 laces could fit in her uniform. Tobin walked with her arms following the motion of her legs, her back a steel rod, keeping her head parallel to the floor. She kept a blank expression on her face. People could gossip, they could stare, but they would never see her break. Gaze forward. She passed female patients as they left their room to make their way to the nurse's station. One gray-haired patient made a point of whimpering when she crossed in front of Tobin, and their eyes met momentarily. Don't look at her, said a blonde patient who grabbed the woman's hand and pulled her away. Susan, Tobin thought her name was. The pair quickened their pace. Tobin sighed. She reached the end of the hallway and stepped into the busiest section of the 4th floor ward where the nurse's station sat. The station consisted of a main office from which the medications were distributed, a break room, and a locker room for personal belongings. Tobin never got a good look at the 2 smaller rooms. Patients weren't allowed in them. It didn't stop her from trying to catch a peek whenever a nurse or a guard left the rooms unattended. Get in line, no loitering, said the baby-faced guard before continuing on, probably to check the male's dormitory. The 2 genders' sleeping and bathroom facilities were located on either end of the ward, though they shared communal areas such as the cafeteria, nurse's station, and the common room for entertainment. Tobin made her way to the main office, where a line of 5 people waited. She joined the line, staring at the back of a man's head. His hair was shaggy, the color of rust, greasy from the shine of it. Someone had given him a bowl haircut, poor guy. Tired, Tobin yawned and covered her mouth with the back of her hand. If she was lucky, she'd be able to squeeze in a nap. Not that she slept, more like dozed, but it kept her from doing a good imitation of a zombie walk. She rubbed her eyes and stepped forward when the front of the line lost a member. When she made it to the front, she was trying to hold back another yawn and failing. A white-haired nurse with a stern expression stood behind a white counter and a thick pane of glass. Half-moon glasses rested on the tip of her rounded nose, and she studied Tobin from above the lenses. "Chatty as always, Miss Blake," said Nurse Harding, and without looking away, she picked up a white paper cup from the tray at her left. She gave the cup's contents a passing glance before sliding the cup through the opening in the glass where it met the counter. The nurse checked Tobin's name off her list with a finger tap on the screen of an iPad. Tobin, knowing what was expected of her, pinched the paper cup by the rim with her slender fingers. She tipped it to her open mouth, dropping 3 pills, a blue and 2 white, inside. The sweet coating jolted her taste buds. She took the second cup Harding held out to her and swallowed the pills with a mouthful of water. "Open, please." Tobin obeyed, stretching lips wide. She lifted her tongue, tilted her head back and forth. Satisfied that Tobin had swallowed the pills, the nurse waved her off. Tobin crushed the paper cups before throwing them into the garbage can by the counter. She mentally checked pills off her own to-do list before setting off to complete the next item, shower. Usually, showering came before medication, but she wanted to avoid Lacey. The bathroom facilities were located beside the dormitories. The women's bathroom was foam green, spacious, and smelled of wet towels. A scent of soap, strong enough to burn the inside of one's nostrils, greeted Tobin the moment she entered. She scanned the room for her soon-to-be ex-roommate. One wall was divided into 8 blue-tiled shower stalls. None of the stalls had curtains or closures. Bars of soap rested on little white shelves that protruded from the wall. Mold grew plentiful along the damp white ceiling, and the drains were either covered in dry suds or clogged with hair. The wall opposite the showers held metal hooks and cubby holes for clothes and the flip-flops patients used while washing. The flip-flops were later thrown into cubbies carrying the patient's last name. Toilets were on the other end of the room. There were 4 in total, which meant another line to wait in every morning. 2 sinks with soap dispensers sat across the bright blue bathroom stalls. There were no mirrors, though there had been at some point. Tobin glanced at the empty rectangular wooden frames above each sink and pursed her lips. Maybe a patient had smashed one, tried to use pieces of the mirror as a weapon. It wouldn't surprise her. Thankful that Lacey wasn't present, Tobin removed her clothes under the watchful eye of a nurse and put them in the laundry basket by the shower stalls. Half the showers were empty. She chose the one furthest from the door and turned the water on. She would have 10 minutes to wash before the water was automatically shut off. Tobin was meticulous when it came to personal hygiene. Unlike some of the other patients who had to be talked into washing or scrubbed until their skin was red, she enjoyed showering. She tilted her head under the spray of warm water, ignoring the crying patient 2 stalls down. Tina always cried. She believed the water was going to melt her skin off. At least that was what she screamed at the nurses who helped her wash. The only reason Tobin knew the patient's name was from hearing the nurses do their best to reason with her. Tobin took the bar of soap and washed before scrubbing the bar and her matted hair. She had to work fast. The water wouldn't stay warm. She counted under her breath, fingers working at the knots in her hair. When she reached 6 minutes, she turned her back to the spray, arched and winced as icy water hit her scalp. She rinsed her hair as long as she could before the cold had her teeth chattering. If her hair got crusty from leftover soap, who cared? A nurse handed her an almost dry towel as she stepped out of the stall. She wrapped the thin material around her torso, shivering. 5 minutes later, dressed in clean clothes, she was herded out to wait in the common room until breakfast. The common room, a cube of butter yellow, was outside the women's dormitory. In one corner sat a second-hand sofa angled towards a 32-inch flat-screen television. The flat screen had been donated to the Institute a few years ago to replace the ancient tube TV, complete with rabbit ears that they used to have. A rerun of Friends was on. Tobin considered watching until she saw the 4 patients squished together on the sofa. She shook her head. Someone should do something about that pastel pink flowered covering, she thought. It was hideous. Not that the original upholstery had been any nicer. Her gaze dropped to the sofa space, where the material had come undone from restless foot-kicking to reveal the original yellow-green fabric beneath. Which was worse, the overly cheery flowers or the puke color beneath? Rhetorical question. The sofa's appearance wasn't made any better by the 2 flattened pillows placed on either end. They might have started out bright orange, but their shade now resembled the color of rotting pumpkins. At least green and orange would have made sense. Orange and pink? Not so much. To the left of the sofa sat a black love seat missing a leg. Someone had shoved a novel under to keep it level, the book cover scratched beyond recognition. The faux leather love seat could sit too, but if Tobin grabbed it first, she got it to herself. Too bad 2 female patients were sitting there already. Her head tilted as she studied the pair. One had light brown hair that hung like string around her heart-shaped face. She sat primly, her ankles crossed over to one side. Her roommate's hair was shaved, and she slouched lazily. Roommates, friends? Tobin squinted, trying to remember their names. She should know them. The one with the shaved head was into her 2nd year at Mandwell. 6 months for the other girl. Both looked about 18. She shrugged and turned away to find something else to do. Watching TV was a no. Across the room were plastic tables of different sizes, each with 4 to 6 metal folding chairs. A 5-shelf bookcase took up space against the wall, made of 4 rectangular windows. The first 2 shelves held books varying from fairy tales to classics like Little Women. 2 more shelves were crammed with boxes of games and puzzles. More than half the boxes were missing pieces, which frustrated Tobin, though no one else minded when a puzzle was left incomplete. Art supplies for therapy and educational purposes were on the last shelf. The supplies were taken out when a patient had to wait for a doctor running late or during an awkward family visit. A coffee-skinned man, probably in his 30s, was playing checkers by himself. His brown hair had receded far from the original hairline, despite his comb-over attempt to hide it. He stacked the pieces by color, red and black, creating his own version of the game. Sitting at the table with him were a boy around 20 with unwashed blonde hair and spikes from running his fingers through it, and a girl a few years younger with brown hair and 2 stubby pigtails. They stared at a heap of puzzle pieces in front of them. Tobin watched them for a while. Neither moved to start the puzzle. Bored with them, she glanced up and met the gaze of one of the supervising nurses. Nurse Joe, a 6'2" bodybuilder of a man, was in his late 30s. He had a shiny bald head and olive skin. She took in the permanent black scruff on his lower jawline. It went well with the scowl he was never without. He stared back at her from his post by the bookshelf, arms crossed and biceps on display. She didn't mind. He glared at everybody. She was curious why he decided to go into nursing. It seemed an odd career choice for such a man, but who was she to judge? Anyway, she doubted he'd answer if she asked. Tobin looked around to see who the other nurse was on duty. While Joe was stable in the common room, the second nurse switched between nurses Helga and Tiffany. Helga was in her 50s. A grim woman with burgundy-colored hair and sharp green eyes, she had a sturdy build and broad shoulders. In contrast, Tiffany was a chatty woman in her early 20s. She was in her 8th month on the 4th floor ward. Still enthused by the high of helping those in need, the brown-eyed brunette looked to be about 16 in her nurse's uniform, standing maybe at 5'2". Tobin studied her, unsure what to make of the woman. Tiffany wanted to be pals with the patients, including Tobin. It was a misguided outlook, though sweet. She had an unhealthy addiction to her cell phone. When she wasn't texting, she was talking patients into participating in Snapchats. Tobin didn't know what a Snapchat was until she stared into the phone screen to see herself and the nurse with cartoon dog ears and a snout over their faces. After that, she learned to duck whenever the nurse had her phone out, which was pretty much all the time. It was a Tiffany day. The young woman was flitting around the room, sticking her phone in people's faces, while Joe glowered in the background, stoic. A smile tugged on Tobin's lips. What would happen if Tiffany tried to get Joe in a Snapchat? Tobin ducked her head and crossed the room to gaze out the four-windowed wall, hoping to evade Tiffany. Beyond the wire mesh in the glass and off in the distance was a thicket of trees. She took in the scene with a sigh. Winter continued to reign over the forest. Not for much longer, though. March would soon come to an end. Tobin couldn't wait for the barren branches of maples and oaks to lose their icy coats and sprout new greenery. The white and brown scene was broken up by the occasional pine trees and cedars glittering from their snowflake-tipped needles. The forest was a tease, a taste of freedom, and the winter mascot war didn't change the peace it brought her. Tobin leaned forward until her forehead pressed against the glass. The trees were like a maze keeping intruders out. If someone wanted entry, they would have to brave scratches and cuts from the twisting and reaching branches. Who knew what wildlife waited there? Animals and insects could be hiding in the trees or hunched under shrubs, waiting, ready to pounce on invaders. A ghost of a smile hovered on Tobin's mouth at the whimsical thoughts. One day, she would know. Time for breakfast! The enthusiastic call came from Tiffany, startling Tobin from her reverie. She glanced over her shoulder. Tiffany was standing in the middle of the room, arms held outward. Come and get it while it's hot. Tobin stayed where she stood, but faced the room again. Patients got to their feet, some quick to obey, others shuffling along. They headed towards the second set of doors, which led to the cafeteria. She was about to follow when she noticed that one patient hadn't moved. A boy with dull blonde hair, a couple inches in length. He was painfully thin, yet he remained seated at the table closest to Tobin, hands folded on the tabletop, wrists nothing more than skin stretched across bone. He looked maybe 4 years younger. 15, maybe 16. The boy was zoned out, either lost in his thoughts or droopy from his meds. Tobin watched to see what the nurses would do. Tiffany caught her eye. Come, come, she said. Food won't wait forever. Tobin rolled her eyes. Yes, because if I wait too long, the mush will grow legs and walk off the table, she thought. She walked toward the cafeteria, her attention still stuck on the skeletal boy. Tiffany made a shooing motion with her hands. Tobin gave the boy one more glance before looking away, then followed the sounds of clattering utensils and the rising and crashing waves of patients' chatter. They led her across the small hallway and through another set of dark gray doors. The smell of burnt bacon greeted her nostrils. Patients sat at beige tables with bench-like seats, 3 per bench and 12 people per table. A buffet-like bar divided the kitchen from the seating area. Tobin took a tray from one end and got in line, grabbing whatever was closest while looking around. Her gaze stopped on a man sitting at the end of a table in the middle of the room. He was tall, 2 or 3 inches over 6 feet. His frame was slender, without the required bulk that would have balanced out his height, making him look stretched and gangly. His face was an elongated oval, ending with a pointed chin. Thin nose in the center, dark eyes, and thick black brows set far apart. The lower half of his face was shadowed with stubble, while the top of his head had lost about 60% of his black hair. He intrigued her. Mikey Martin, as he referred to himself, ate food in a strange manner. Tobin often got so swept in watching him she forgot to eat. He scooped up his mushy oatmeal and brought it to his mouth, only to return it to the bowl and empty the spoon's contents. He repeated this ritual 9 times before eating the spoonful. Dip, scoop, Lift, return, dump, and repeat. Tobin picked up a cup of juice, eyes on him. What would happen if he accidentally ate the oatmeal on the spoon's third trip, she wondered. Would he have to spit it out and start again? Every type of food had its own special routine, but always in repetitions of 9. Tobin hypothesized that he ate that way because it made the food more enjoyable. To test her observation, she followed his habits. Soon, however, she grew tired of the repetition and would forget what number she was on. She called her theory a fail, though she didn't stop watching him. Tobin reached the end of the food line. When Tobin reached the end of the food line, she chose a table with the fewest patients where she munched on a bland breakfast sandwich and enjoyed the show. That was chapter 2, and I hope you are enjoying the book so far. I will be posting chapter 3 next week. Until then, I hope you guys all have a great week. Take care, and goodbye.